Hello, welcome to this very special edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace reporting live here at the famous Blue Note Jazz Club here in New York City. As this is my very first segment of 2022, I wanted to document and showcase a milestone for the Blue Note Jazz Club. At the end of last year, they celebrated 40 years of being one of the most prestigious jazz clubs here in the United States as well as New York City. And the Blue Note has presented all kinds of music from jazz, R&B, and hip-hop. And what better way to close out 2021 is Grammy Award winning trumpeter Chris Botti for his 16th annual holiday residency. Now for 16 years, Chris has invited friends far and wide in the industry to come and perform many different types of music genres, ranging from classical to R&B, funk, as well as jazz, just to name an endless few. Now tonight you're going to see highlights of his holiday residency, and I had a chance to sit down to talk to him about how this started and why this has become one of the biggest residencies in New York City in the month of December, as well as reflect on his musical experience. As you might know, Mr. Botti has studied with the likes of Dr. David Baker, as well as Woody Shaw, and played and recorded with the likes of the great Buddy Rich, as well as Frank Sinatra and Sting, just to name an endless few. So sit back, relax, enjoy highlights of the 40th anniversary of Blue Note Jazz Club's Chris Botti residency here on the Pace Report, here in New York City. Chris, thank you for allowing me to do this. Thank you for, we're living in crazy times right now. New York is very uncertain. The world is uncertain. And I'm glad that, one, you're able to connect with your fans, and two, you didn't decide to just cancel. Because last year you couldn't do it because... Right. Tell my viewers how this started and how we got to right now, because I remember when this was just a week, and then all of a sudden we expanded to a month. Right.
So as my career started to grow a little bit and get more following, we had a great relationship early on with the Ben Susan family that runs the Blue Note. So we added a week, and then I've never really loved, because there's no music business going on during the holidays. So I was like telling my agent, can we work more? And then they well, maybe we can get the Blue Note to add another week. So then we added another week. Then we did 4 weeks, but no Christmas and Christmas Eve. And I'm like, everyone wants to go out at Christmas and Christmas Eve. Why not? And so we added Christmas and Christmas Eve, and those are the two most exciting nights, I think, because people are pent up. They've, hung out with their family all day, and then they bring their family down to the show. And for a lot of people, I mean, it's not the Rockettes, but a lot of people travel to New York annually to see our show. And it's developed into this 56 shows and 28 nights. And it's the most fun we have because people in the business, like yourself, or singers or whatever, get to sit in with us and hang out with us. And if we play one night at Carnegie Hall, I mean, I've been offered to play Radio City Music Hall or something like that. I would rather play here for 56 shows than one night at Radio City Music Hall, because you can grow an audience from this standpoint. But if you play one night at Radio City Music Hall and 3 years later you can't play at Radio City Music Hall anymore, then it's a downward trend, right? So you got to look. You want to stay in your lane. That's the most important thing. And this is my lane. We have a great situation, not only here at the Blue Note, but SF Jazz and Jazz Alley in Seattle, and in Japan at the Blue Note. All these residencies that we go back to year after year, weeks on end. And it takes up a bunch of our schedule, and we don't have to get on a plane every day, which the rest of the time we're doing.
Chris, and it's funny you say stay in your lane, because every year you have special guests that come out. Like tonight, there's Veronica Swift, your buddy Sting. You've had some iconic figures, music figures, come out and play. And do you think that's really the full music experience, why people come? Because every night there's a line for both shows to come check you out.
Well, it's my musical experience. So let's take, for example, two of my favorite trumpet players. Miles. Okay, so Miles went around with a quintet, right? And so he would play 20-30% of the show, and he'd walk off the stage, and you were gifted with seeing Wayne, Herbie, Tony, Ron, okay? Or George Coleman. Wynton plays, but he's got jazz at Lincoln Center. That's his format, to be this incredible ambassador for jazz, one of the greatest trumpet players, my favorite, and all that. My way in, because I worked with so many popular singers, through Paul Simon, through Joni Mitchell, through Sting, I learned how to and Bocelli and stuff, I learned how to sort of orchestrate this mishmash of, the most important thing is, let someone talented have the spotlight and not be fearful of that. To let them, be a star. I want Veronica or whomever, Chad L.B. or Andy Snitzer or whatever, to shine. And that's what Sting's number one thing he imparted on me is if your band shines bright, it makes your star shine brighter. So I just orchestrate in a different way. If you look at the totality of my playing, it's a lot on stage, but because I don't do the number one thing that I really hate when jazz musicians do, they introduce the whole band at the very first song.
Right.
You see it a million times, right?
Yeah.
Tonight, welcome everyone. Here we have bang, 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 bang. I take my time introducing everyone, so you get to learn a little bit about their personality, and you focus on them, and the audience gets to see how special someone like Veronica is, right? And then by doing so, having that little moment of appreciation for them, and it's not BS, right? It's real. I really, really respect all of them. So, and I think that translates. So we're letting the audience in on something that I think is genuine, and the artistry on stage is great.
Chris, another component to this is that the records that you've recorded, your discography reflects what we see here, but we also, when you play someone like the Boston, the live in Boston, you're accompanied by strings. What I see here is really a myriad of what your records sound like, but you put your heart and soul in it live because it's a live show, and I think that's part of the experience of people leave here knowing that they got opera, they got R&B, a little bit of funk, they got jazz, they got a little bit of everything. Was that planned also?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if I reduplicated my records, the audience would be asleep. In other words, if you look at Miles Davis's Kind of Blue record, right? The whole thing is just this haze of just beauty, right? Just sits there. It's just like perfect. But when he played that same stuff live, when he went out and played So What live, right? And he played Walkin' live or all that stuff, it was like burning, right? Or my point is that when you play a show live, you need to play visceral. You need to play complicated or flashy or fast tempo or show off your chops or be a little more cerebral Whereas on a record, they, like in classical music, if you're Joshua Bell and you play Paganini, you know, and the whole audience goes nuts for all the chops, right? But that same audience doesn't go home and listen to Paganini. They go home and listen to Chopin Nocturne.
Right.
So listening in jazz is a very, very different thing. Like Keith Jarrett's Melody Night with You is a great example. It's the most beautiful record. It's one of his highest selling, highest loved records. But live, he stretched and he played Billy's Bounce and plays all this stuff like it. You know, all the things you are at breakneck tempo, and he shows off all of his jazz skills. But at the end of the day, what makes the people like break down is when he plays Danny Boy or Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and it's just beautiful. You can hear the touch of the thing. So it's a different, like, whereas pop music, if you go see U2, they just reenact their pop record. But I think jazz is a different thing. You have to like look at it and go, okay, so now we're doing a show. And the show has to like go up and down and up and down and take the audience on a ride, where the records have to like kind of sit here and be beautiful all the time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And then too, music is mood. So it's like, if I'm with a young lady and we're drinking wine and we're
Correct.
having food, your music is gonna go on in the background to establish a mood. And your shows, they're the same, but it's different every single set. It's just
But they also you know,
I've sat through 5 of them, and I'm like, this is incredible. But I think another thing that adds to the whole bounce is the vocal part, because, you know, at some point people want to hear the romance. We heard the opera tonight.
Correct.
And then Veronica comes in and she takes it on the Swingsville, which it shows another side of you.
Right.
And then you do the whole solo, you do Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. And that does another thing too. Do you, when you're recording your records, do you go into the studio with your producers saying, okay, we're going to do the amount of ballads, we're going to do some up-tempo stuff, or we're going to experiment with some...
We hardly ever do up-tempo stuff. On the records. No, live we do,
right.
You know, all the up-tempo stuff, but I'm not sure, like, part of me, you know, if I went in and did a bunch of up-tempo stuff, is it ever going to, like, remotely be in the same category as Wynton? So I just kind of go, yeah, you know,
right.
I'm going to stay in my lane. You know, when I first came to New York in 1982 and Wynton exploded on the scene, I knew, like, I shouldn't make a straight-ahead record to try to get in that lane, because there's a glass ceiling there that he set up because of his incredible artistry. So it could be implied up-tempo, which is different. You know, like if you look at Miles' like 2 most famous records, Sketches of Spain and Kind of Blue. They don't have, it's not live at the Plug Nickel.
No, it's not. Musicians
love live at the Plug Nickel, but for the general public, they love, you know, Porgy and Bess, that one. You know, they might like a couple of Workin' and Steamin' or something like that, but you know, the more, you know,
right.
the more kind of like
right.
implied up tempo. Even like
right.
You know, someday my prince will come is implied up tempo. You know, when Hank Mobley and John Coltrane come in, it's got a feel of rhythmic moving, but it's not live at the Black Hawk. Right, where they're just like, you know,
right. It's not Nefertiti.
And Hank Mobley's like crushing down on Oleo. You know, it's not that.
Yeah,
or Nefertiti. And he never played that shit live.
Right.
Sorry, that stuff.
That's cool. Yeah. Now, when you're playing, like I said, you've created your own special lane. You know, there are musicians who say, well, Chris Botti is here, or Chris Botti's too pretty, or how do you respond to the naysayers? Because all I can say is that you have to go see this brother live before you can even make statements like that. Or do you think they based it more on the records that they're hearing versus what you do live?
I mean, I think all the musicians that seen the show, they instantly get it, and it's hard for me to explain the show, like, because we're really playing, you know, real jazz. You know, and you can critique my stuff and say, oh, it's more popular or whatever. However, I'm never apologetic. I love beautiful music, so that's why we open up with those first 2 songs, like those super quiet ballads. I think that resonates with people because it resonates with me. So I'm super unapologetic about being beautiful. So to a lot of jazz musicians, they don't want, in respect for them, you know, they don't want to play something that's overtly pretty. I mean, even Miles, like when he played the beautiful stuff, he wasn't giving it to the audience, he was giving it for him, you know, with his back movements or whatever he was doing. But man, that's heartbreaking what he plays, you know, on like Old Folks or you know, I Fall in Love Too Easily or whatever like that. And so Blue and Green.
I see what you're doing no different than what Herb Alpert did throughout his career, because he did some very pop and commercial stuff. He's also done some straight ahead. He's done some collaborations with Hugh Masekela, Maynard Ferguson. There was a time in the 70s when he went in, and Freddie Hubbard did it too. Freddie Hubbard went in a very different direction commercially. It wasn't just to sell records. I think it's more to stay with the times. But what I think you've done is that you've taken all of these genres and are reintroducing this kind of music to people who've never heard jazz before.
Right, but the difference, maybe the one slight difference is that it's in my makeup. So my first gig with Paul Simon, and then learning how you can make popular music from a guy that's not a rock star, doesn't yell. He's able to bring intimacy in from an arena, or even more, like hundreds of thousands of people, into something really quiet, and also had the best band, Richard T., Steve Gadd, Michael Brecker in the band, and gave them the space and the admiration from the stage. So I was watching this at 28 years old going, that's in the way he orchestrated everything and the way the show moved, and then to go from him to Joni Mitchell with Brian Blade and Larry Klein in the band and go, this is a different kind of thing. And then to go to Sting, who was like, you know, I promise you I'll break the sound of your trumpet to a world that doesn't even know about jazz. So he's able to, like, I mean, Sting's not inherently a jazz musician, but he, you know, he had that great band with Branford and everyone, and I think some of the best stuff Branford ever did, certainly some of the most iconic writing, even if he didn't get writing credit for it, is the opening phrases of Englishman in New York.
Oh man,
I mean, like, you know,
listen, Sting, I'm gonna tell you, when Blue Turtles came out, I knew that it was, he wanted to, he did it the equivalent of what Miley Cyrus did when she left Hannah Montana. She went all over the place. But the thing was that he wanted to do the music he wanted to do that he couldn't do with the Police.
But he's got the best people. And Branford,
yes.
I mean, Branford's soprano playing is my favorite, you know, like on soprano. And I think some of the stuff he did with Sting, it may not be as heady for him, but compositionally, like the way he plays in that, not only tone-wise, the simplicity and the architecture of the melody and stuff. It's like, I mean, it's as important as the song, sort of. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's great.
Growing up in Portland, your mother was very instrumental in introducing you to music. And how did you, by way of Miles Davis, know that trumpet was what you wanted to do?
Well, when I heard Funny Valentine from the Avery Fisher concert for more, with the introduction from Herbie, like in 2 notes, I knew I was connected to, before I knew about Doc Severinsen and Maynard, this kind of like, you know, joyous, and Louis a little bit, like the joyous kind of like outwardly, the projection of the instrument. But then Miles brought this kind of like, even the way he holds the horn, it's like, it's more here, and it resonated with me. And what my mom did, which I kind of tell a lot of parents to do, it's not like she influenced me because she was a musician, but what she did was thought out of the realm of where I lived. So she would find like the top trumpet teacher, even if he was 90 miles away and he played in the Oregon Symphony as the principal trumpet player, and just cold call him. And, you know, or she got me like 2 grants, like, you know, filled out all the paperwork. I mean, I was just in high school or, you know, whatever, or going off to college to study 1 summer with Woody Shaw and 1 summer with George Coleman. You know, my mom did a lot of stuff to aid me in following my dream, but I had to convince her about that. Because every parent wants their kid to be a musician until the time they say, like, I really want to be a musician. They're like, no, we want you to be a doctor, right?
Right. Now, Woody Shaw was the golden child of the 70s. As Lee Morgan and Freddie Hubbard passed the baton to the 70s, it was Woody Shaw. And Woody Shaw was a guy that brought a very unique voice to the trumpet as well as jazz. What was it that he taught you, and what were some of the things that fundamentally that you were using as a trumpet player when you learned from him?
Well, he operated, at least by the time I hung out with him, he was really kind of operating more, his practice routine was more involved in like intervals rather than like playing songs or like long phrases. Like Tom Harrell, you know, has all this calculation of harmony and stuff like that. And Woody was just doing like lots of almost like technical exercises that were minor thirds, fourths, you know, all this weird thing to work on your lip flexibility and articulation, but they were angular. Whereas Tom Harrell has this like, you know, effortlessly fluid kind of run through all the changes, which is magic. It was kind of an opposition of that stuff because I've hung out with Tom before early on, and I'm a big fan. So, and I think that's what Woody's legacy that separates him. His vocabulary is much more angular than Lee Morgan, Freddie Hubbard, Tom Harrell, etc. Clifford Brown.
Yeah. Now, George Coleman, I was telling you a story about a couple months ago. He played a Sweet Papa Lou's birthday party. And this guy was in his winter coat playing from a chair. And the band is over here. He's sitting in the chair. And the guy sounds just like he
ever did.
My God.
Yeah.
What was that like, learning from him? And what did he impart on you as a musician?
Well, I would say that maybe my time with him, it was a summer of 1984. And it was maybe the most humbling because he never played the saxophone with me, right? So he would sit at the piano and we would talk about like, you know, some sort of chord change application, some sort of 251, 36251, how are you going to approach this? Then he would like make me write it out, and then he would kind of like, I mean, he was very, very academic in a way, but he wasn't interested in like jamming or hanging out. It was very like, here's what you have to do. And now, after the years have gone by, I've seen how I should have done more of that. It's so important. I mean, he's very, very thoughtful about the way he writes lines out. I'm sure Tom Harrell has to be in that. They have a lot of similarities, right? The way they know harmony in all the keys. And to say you know it in all the keys is one thing, but to be that kind of fluid throughout all those things. George has that, Tom Harrell has that. Not a lot of people have that. And so he was a big fan of like writing stuff out, and I learned a lot, but I wish I would have stuck more with what he would have been teaching back then.
Very important part of your musicianship is the hands-on with the musicians. And another very important guy that we have to talk about, and you studied at Indiana University, Dr. David Baker, NEA jazz master. I'm from Indianapolis, so I know a lot about him and Larry Ridley. Dr. Baker, from a lot of the students who I've encountered over the years, two of the most important things that they imparted on him is one, the history of this music.
Yeah.
But the most important part of that, the second part, is what you do to make the tradition great. Is there some validity in what I just said?
I would add one thing. So I met David Baker 1978 at a Jamie Aebersold clinic.
Wow.
With Tom Harrell, and he was there. And the only single reason I went to Indiana University, then later I found out, you know, through going there, then I found out about Bill Adam, the trumpet teacher, helped me immensely. But as a human, his charm and his genuine kind of thrill for teaching music, imparting this stuff on young people, it's really hard because like a lot of they have a lot of people that are great talents and they have a lot to impart on people, but they don't have that enthusiasm. Like if you look at great college basketball coaches, the ones like, you know, whatever, you name it, they have enthusiasm, and that's why they can get people to come play for them, right? David Baker sort of had that same thing.
Wow.
So his enthusiasm was out in front of this immense talent. But when you first meet him, it's hard to impart all the immense talent. He's got to get a kid to come to Indiana University, right? So he got me like that in one, like a couple meetings and a couple hanging out, right? And so I went to Indiana, forever eternally grateful for that, because I learned from him, and then I learned from Bill Adam on trumpet, who, you know, all the structure of my physical trumpet playing is because of Bill Adam. And it's because of David Baker's charm, and subsequently, like a great politician, and subsequently he had all the stuff to back it up. Maybe not like all the great politicians.
Well, that's great because you know, you did something that a lot of musicians who really want to do. You took a leap of faith, and you went out on the road with Frank Sinatra, and you played in Buddy Rich's band. Now, here's the last 3 or 4 months I've been listening to a lot of Buddy Rich. In fact, I just reordered the Buddy Rich album live with Sammy Davis Jr. And one of the things that I've noticed about Buddy Rich, and he's one of my grandfather's favorite drummers, you have to really know how to swing and play hard with him.
Yeah.
What was that like? And then I know as a trumpet player, that had to be holy hell, playing night after night, playing on his speed.
Well, there wasn't a lot of nights after night because I only lasted about 3 months.
Woo!
He had a really favorite trumpet player, and I replaced this guy. And this guy, his influences were like Big Spiderbeck and like kind of more maybe Buddy Bolden, like, you know, like in the pocket. At the time, I'm into like Woody Shaw and all this kind of like stuff, and so when I hit the stage, me and Buddy never really got along necessarily. I'm proud to say that I was in the band for one of those famous Buddy Rich tapes when they were being recorded. You know, you know the tapes I'm talking about. So that's my only kind of claim to fame. It wasn't the best experience for me, and I learned a couple things. Well, first of all, he's a great talent, but I learned that if I ever had a band, I would do my best to not treat them the way he treated, because that character from Whiplash is based on Buddy Rich.
Okay.
And you can figure out the rest. Like he was a very, very tough guy on the band, really tough.
But he came from that old school.
You're right. You're
he
correct.
Came from that.
Tommy Dorsey and all that stuff. Yeah, they were all tough on one another. Absolutely. Yeah. In his defense, and he's an awesome talent. I'm not saying, but then I also realized that being in a big band was something I didn't want to do. You know, the kind of like almost military regimented stuff where the 5 trumpets line up and everyone's like lined up and they all wear the same thing. You know, I realized I didn't want to do that. You know, when I was at Indiana, we came out of Indiana, or Andy Snitzer, who's playing saxophone with us, came out of Miami or wherever, and we had people to look up to, like a Michael Brecker or David Sanborn or Steve Gadd or Richard T. These guys were great musicians, and they played in popular music, and they also had their own kind of like rock star thing to them, their own individuality. They weren't beholden to just like be in a big band. So I looked at Jerry Hay and what he did on the West Coast with all the great popular music records. So I became a studio musician. You know, I moved here and tried to follow in the footsteps, and also being on the road with Michael Brecker gave me a name to be in the studio musician. So I worked with all these great, you know, Randy Brecker and John Faddis and all these guys in the studio, and that kept me out of trying to, like, you know, be in a big band. You know, because I got a little, you know, shell-shocked by Buddy Rich.
Sinatra, I mean, he was the chairman of the board, and he was the chairman of the board for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, probably quintessentially one of the greatest vocalists of all time, probably the top 3.
Yeah.
What was it like playing with him, accompanying him, and what do you see when you play with vocalists, when you record with vocalists, or you have them on stage? What are some of the things that you look for when you accompany a vocalist?
So, when I was in his band, I dropped out of college. I went to Hollywood the next day, and it was a 2-week gig at the Universal Amphitheater. And it was kind of a big record for Sinatra. It was called L.A. is My Lady. Quincy had produced it. And it was back in the day when the Universal Amphitheater was open air. So it was like a big deal. So everyone at that time, like Angie Dickinson, Lee Majors, everyone's in the audience. Like there's a bunch of hoo-haws. The one thing I remember about that whole time, and the one thing that I tried to, it stuck with me to today, is that you have the most iconic individual, and he walks out on stage, and he stands in the middle of the stage, and he commands the whole arena to him, but then he'll also have a conversation with the person in the third row. It's almost like he's Rickles, like he's like a comedian. And then he'll spend a lot of time turning around to the band and saying, Nelson Riddle Orchestra. This is a Don Costa arrangement. You know, so he's got this trifecta of stuff, right? So he's relating to everyone. He's relating to someone right here in a real intimate way. Then he's turning around and acknowledging the band. Now, if you go to 50 popular shows today, sometimes the bands don't even look at each other. They look straight ahead. They all have in-ear monitors. They get the click track. They get the stuff off tape. In between the songs, they go, thank you, and they tune up. And they play. They're not like, you know, when Sinatra comes out of Las Vegas at Sands and he goes, how did all these people get in my room? You know,
That's
it's
right.
hilarious.
Right.
You know, and he learned, I think, you know, he hung out with so many comedians. Like Rickles was the same way. And at the end of his life, I became friends with Don and went to a bunch of his shows, and we hung out. Like, and he had this way of like not only talking to the whole audience, but to one person, and then making it all beautiful after all this berating of the audience. But most of all, Sinatra would turn around and acknowledge the people behind him. Someone had a great solo, someone had a great arrangement, someone was a great drummer. If it was Count Basie, he was all over that, right? You know, he always said, this is a Billy May arrangement, this is a Don Costa arrangement, this is a Quincy Jones arrangement. He always acknowledged the musicians, and that stuff is gone.
Yeah, it is.
And that's what I learned from him. So if I'm on stage, I want to have everyone like the show, but then there's sometimes I like point out a couple people and have conversation with them, and I always acknowledge people behind me. So that's the threefold.
Said life's a losing gamble to me. Everybody knows I'm moaning, and in the evening find me moaning. Said I'm so tired of crying these blues. I'm so tired of playing these dues. Everybody knows I'm moaning. I'm so tired of crying these blues. Said I'm so tired of paying these dues. Yeah, everybody knows I'm on it. You, me, T for two and two for T. Shaboo-doo-doo-dah. You got a little something stronger than tea, brother?
Bill Milkowski has written the definitive biography, a fantastic book on Michael Brecker, who happens to be one of my favorite saxophonists. And I remember years ago, Billy Cobham told me a story about the Brecker brothers, Randy Brecker, and especially Michael. He said that they played with a very different intensity. There was a different vibe of how they played. And I want to know your take on Michael, because Michael didn't release his first solo album until
way later,
yeah. Which was really kind of, you scratch your head. But he and David Sanborn quintessentially and Steve Gadd were pretty much on a lot of popular commercial music from 70 to 80, right?
Totally.
Those were the three cats. I want to know your interaction the first time you saw him play, and when you started interacting with him. What was his presence like musically?
So I never saw him play until the very first time when I was called in as a sub on the Paul Simon gig, and Michael Brecker's first day was also then, and we were rehearsing, and 2 weeks into it, we did a benefit concert here at the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and Paul Simon just turned around to the tour manager and said, "I want that kid to play the whole tour."
Wow.
So it was 8 years of standing next to Michael Brecker in Paul Simon's band.
Wow.
From 1990 until 1998. And that's how I knew him. I didn't know, I've seen him play subsequently for his shows when he was alive, but I knew him as this, and everyone will say this, he's one of the most beautiful, humble, almost to a fault. The guy would go out there and just crush it, play these incredible solos, and then come back and go, "Oh, that wasn't very good." I'm just like, "Okay."
That's what the musician said in the biography.
Yeah.
And I was like, "How do you?"
It's not a. He actually felt that. It's not like how sometimes celebrities go, "Oh, that wasn't very good." He really was that book more than anything. He was like so nice. He was so genuine and lovely to everyone. But I loved hearing him practice. He would practice like the same little nugget of a phrase backstage before the shows for like months on end. Months. And it was awesome to hear like the laser focus. He's got all this vocabulary, and he's still working on these little kind of 3-bar phrases, 2-bar phrases, a couple of octave things, and his, of course, his tone and everything was brilliant. Gadd was in the band as well as Richard T. So I got to hang out with all those guys at 28 years old, and it was just, for me, life-changing. It gave me an appetite for being on the road. It gave me respect for people that came before me, and it made me admire. I admire great musicians. So if I hear Gadd, no one's tone of the bass drum, he could just be playing Hearts and Bones, like the simplest song, and it's just magic, man. It's just like, huh? And no wonder Paul had him around. Paul has the best taste in musicians, period. But he, it was just a great ride to be kind of like watching. And then Michael subsequently asked me to produce one song on his Out of the Loop album, which we won a Grammy for, which he was probably just being a nice guy to me. But, it was super fun.
Right. The first time I heard that Herbie Hancock record, the tribute to Joni Mitchell, I was like, this is garbage. I was like, this is blasphemy. Why are we doing a jazz record tribute to? And all my friends are like, man, you're crazy. You gotta listen to the record again. And after 3 or 4 listens, I said, wow, this is a remarkable recording. And you've had interaction with Joni, but Joni is a very complicated figure for me because I love her words. She's a very, 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 very she's like Dylan. Her words are very poetic, and they're final. Working with Joni as a musician, how were you able to, one, translate the music to the words and relate to the words to the music?
Well, first of all, we did 30 shows, all opening for Dylan.
Oh, shit.
So it was Brian Blade, Larry Klein, Greg Lees on pedal steel, Joni and myself. And we did 30 shows opening for Dylan. And when we would drive from the hotel to the airport, she talks a lot. So she would just like run her mouth and just like observe. So if we were driving through like some, epic landscape in like Nova Scotia or whatever, like she'd be like cinematography, the way she's writing lyrics, like literally like every day. Like it's just, if I could have just recorded what she's talking about, like look at this, the house, the way it sits up, it's amazing. She's a genius. However, she dressed me down on the second day of rehearsal, and it's still stuck with me to this day with my band. She was like, Chris, I'm in the batter's box. Don't knock me out of the batter's box. Don't throw inside. She gives me a baseball analogy, a Canadian singer, right? But she's like, you're crowding my plate, right? Like you're playing too much. You're fucking all over the place. Get out. So I learned through her, at least not yelling at me anymore, how to like, not to lean up against a singer. And subsequently when I played with Streisand or Sting or whatever, I think I learned I always think back to that one rehearsal where she dressed me down.
But that's crazy, Chris, because we listened to those Gothic recordings with the album she did with Matheny and Pastorius, and those two musicians are like...
But they're in a different register.
That's true.
So the trumpet sits in the same vocal register as her. And so it's competing. If someone underneath playing Jocko's and playing that, she's okay with that. Larry Klein does it. It's fine. But I'm literally here, so I have to like move away or play under or I got dressed down and I deserved it. I was an over anxious kid trying to like prove myself and overplaying. Basically, people overplay. And I was overplaying, and she said, "You're overplaying," and it stuck with me, and it's helped me so much, especially with other people, like in my own band. Sometimes if Lee just like lays off the cymbal and moves to another cymbal, it makes the voice pop up. It's basically the same thing. Anything in the register, it's not so much busy in other things. It's if something's in the register of the voice or the register of the piano, and you move that away. And that's why if you listen to Kind of Blue, the piano's there, the bass and the trumpet are here, and everything has got space around it. And that's the most important thing, to not clutter up the middle. And Joni was, head on in that.
I got you under my skin. I got you deep in the heart of me. So deep in my heart that you're really a part of me. 'Cause I got you under my skin. I tried so not to give in. I said to myself, this affair will never go so well. But why do I try to resist you when, baby, I know so well? 'Cause I got you under my skin. I'd sacrifice anything, come what might, for the sake of having you near. In spite of a warning voice that comes in the night, repeats and repeats in my ear. Don't you know, you never can you, 'cause I got you under my skin.
Chris Botti, what does jazz music mean to you?
Well, I don't know if I'm a jazz musician. My job is to be in the business of a Chris Botti show. In the same way that I would say, if someone asked John Mayer, you know, what does the history of rock and roll mean? Well, he's not ever going to be the Beatles. He's never going to be Bob Dylan. He's in the John Mayer business, right? So all I want to do is go from city to city to city and do our show, whether some people think it's got elements of opera or too pretty or jazzy or whatever it is. If they come to the show and they love it, my job is to do that show and have that promoter say, we want you back. And that's the only thing. I can't speak out for the rest of the jazz because I don't know. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
My man, thank you. That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at the famous Blue Note Jazz Club here in New York City for the 16th annual Chris Botti Residency as part of the 40th anniversary of the Blue Note Jazz Club. I'd like to personally congratulate the talented Chris Botti for his time. Make sure you look for him this year coming to a city near you, as well as his residency. For more information, please visit him online at chrisbotti.com. Also, people, please come and check out the Blue Note Jazz Club when you're ever here in New York City. For more information, please visit them online at thebluenote.com. I'd like to personally thank the staff and management here at the Blue Note for their warm hospitality. As always, please visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column, as well as my past segments, as well as like, share, and subscribe, and leave comments. Till next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.